All right, so your windows are installed, your walls are painted, and you're ready to put on trim. You picked out your casing, you take a piece of it, you go up to your window, and you realize there's a big space here. The edge of your window doesn't line up with the drywall. Very common. So what you're going to have here is an extension jamb. In this video, I'm going to talk about the two different types of extension jambs that you're going to need. One could be a straight extension jamb, and one might be tapered. I'm going to show you both methods. I'm going to show you how to measure them, how to cut them, and how to install them. So stick around and check it out. So let's talk about the tools and materials you're going to need for this project. First of all, you're going to need some kind of material to use as an extension jamb. In this case, I'm using 1x6 primed pine. You don't have to use primed pine. You could use clear pine, you could use poplar, maple, whatever you have. Just try and avoid material with knots in it. I like 3/4 of an inch thick because it's great for holding with the nails. And it'll be a nice base for us to attach our casing to once the extension jamb is installed. You're also going to need flat material, some kind of flat stock material just to use as a straight edge for measuring. You're going to need some sandpaper. This is 120 grit sandpaper with a no-slip back on it. This is from 3M. I like this stuff a lot. I pretty much exclusively use this. Then I have just a scrap block that I'm going to use as a sanding block. Attach it to the back. I'm using 120 grit. It's coarse enough to take off those saw marks, but fine enough that you can still paint it. I also have a Milwaukee 18 gauge nail gun that I'm going to be using. You do not need to use a cordless nail gun. You can use an old school brad nailer with a compressor. You could also just do it by hand with regular finish nails. Any of these methods will work. In this case, I'm going to be using this nail gun. I love this gun. I use it every single day. Can't say enough great things about it. And this one has a Makita battery on it with a special adapter. I'll leave a link in the description. Great tool. If you can, pick one up. If not, you can do this project either way. Last thing you're going to need is if you're going to have a tapered extension jamb. So if the extension jamb is not one consistent thickness from top to bottom, then you're going to need to make some kind of taper. So in this case, I'm going to use a 1x material. In this case, I'm using 1x6 primed pine again, just because I have it lying around. You don't have to use that. You can use any sort of cutoff as long as it has one straight edge. And I like 3/4 of an inch thick. It's nice and solid. Then you're going to need some double-sided tape and a mallet. This is going to help us to cut our tapers on the table saw. Now that we have the materials and our tools ready to go, let's start measuring. All right, so to take our measurements, I'm going to go around to all the corners of the windows as well as all along the edges, and I'm going to take some quick measurements and see what are we looking at for the space. How big of an extension jamb do we need? And I'm going to write them very close to the corner because I know it's going to be covered by the trim. All right, so what I see here is that it's a couple of spots where it's about 1/2 inch, mostly it's 5/8 of an inch. So because it's really close, I'm going to round up to the higher one, and I'm going to say 5/8 of an inch, and I'm going to say that I'm going to do a consistent 5/8 of an inch extension jamb around the whole edge. So for this window, I can do a straight extension jamb. So the next thing I need to do is mark my reveal. Now the reveal is the offset from the edge of the window where the extension jamb is going to sit. You want to have an offset so that there's a spot for the caulk to go. It'll help hold the caulk better over time, less likely to crack, and it's easier to paint. So in order to make that mark, I'm going to pick a spot. I'm going to use a square, an adjustable square, like this one from Kreg. You can use any kind of adjustable square just so that you can lock in a setting. I'm going to pick a spot about 3/16 of an inch in from this line right here. I'm going to tighten it down, and I'm going to make a mark. That's going to be the location where my extension jamb goes. Now I need to go around the whole window and make that mark so that it's consistent all around.
Then it's time to head out to the table saw and rip down those 5/8 strips. Make sure to sand those strips really well to get off all those saw marks.
All right, so we're back at the window. Now I started by cutting the overall 1x6 to about the distance from the drywall to the drywall, which was around 65 inches. That's way more than I needed, but it gave me a more manageable piece instead of the full 8 foot that the piece came with. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to measure my marks from reveal to reveal, and I'm going to add a little more. So basically I'm going to go almost from drywall to drywall, And I'm going to make a mark. I'm going to do the same thing for the left side. I can go big on the sides because it doesn't really matter, you won't see it. The top and the bottom, I'm going to make a more precise cut, but I'll do that after I install my two sides. Now I'm going to nail this off with 1¼ nails. You don't want to use nails that are too long because you have the potential of it splitting the wood and going into the actual window sash itself or into the mechanism that's hanging on the inside. So it's best to use a nail that's not too much longer than the thickness of the material. So 1¼ should be pretty good. Now, as you saw, I lined them up to my marks that I made earlier when I marked out my reveal all around the windows. Sliding it up and down didn't really matter because my overall length was longer than I needed. Now I need to make a more precise measurement for the top and the bottom. So I started by cutting one side of the top and then roughly cut it to about 1 inch or 2 longer than I needed so that I can make an exact measurement by marking. I'm going to line it up here just like this, take my pencil, and mark precisely where I want to go. No reason to measure. If you take a measurement with a tape measure, as you'll see in a lot of my videos, it's always going to be less accurate than putting it in place and marking it. Now I'm going to repeat that process for the bottom, cut it to size on the chop saw, and then install them along the reveal line just like I did with the two sides. An important point when you're nailing off, especially along the sill here, you need to make sure that you're not going to go through and blow it out onto the spot where the window sash goes. So make sure you're closer to the outside of the extension jamb and that you're aiming a little bit down, and don't use nails that are too long. All good. So let's talk about the situation when you have a tapered extension jamb. In this case, the window is pretty close, about 1/4 inch or so away from the sheetrock here, but it kicks in another 1/4 to 1/2 inch at the bottom because this wall is not perfectly straight. It happens. So what I'm going to show you here is how to take the measurements, which are going to be done in the exact same way as the first window, as well as mark out the reveal, and then we're going to go out to the table saw and we're going to cut a taper on the table saw.
So all you have to do to set up the jig is to rip one straight edge along that 1x6. This will give us a reference line to go off of when we set up our tapered extension jambs.
Alright, so now I'm going to mark my measurements on my piece of flat stock here. So I wrote down here 5/16 to 5/8. That's my long taper that I need to do. And along the bottom, which is approximately, right here, it's going to be around 32 inches. I'm going to mark out 32 inches. For the length of the piece, and that one's going to go from 5/16 up to 5/8. So from here to here, I'm going to go from 5/16 to 5/8. From here to the end, I'm going to go from 5/16 also to 5/8. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rip these two pieces on this tapered jig that I made. And basically, the other two sides are going to be straight cuts. So I can treat those just like the other window. They're just a consistent 5/16 and 5/16. So I don't have to do a taper on those two sides. It's just the right side and the bottom.
Now it's back out to the table saw. I'm going to put some double-sided tape on the 1x6. And then I'm going to attach my piece that's going to become the extension jamb. An important thing to note is to add 1/8 of an inch to your measurements. So my 5/8 of an inch, I actually measured to 3/4 of an inch because I know the width of my blade is 1/8 and the saw is going to take off that much extra. So in order for me to get my 5/8, I have to cut it at 3/4. Then after cutting my two straight pieces and my two tapered pieces and doing some sanding, it's back to the window to install exactly as I did in the first window.
Now that fits much better. See guys, the extension jamb is obviously very important. You don't want to just have to fill with caulk or do some crazy thing to try and patch it. You're definitely going to want to do an extension jamb if you're going to have a big gap here between the window and the trim. Alright guys, so thanks for sticking it out to the end. In the next video, I'm going to talk about how to install the casing for these windows. I'm going to be talking about both a beginner method and an advanced professional method. Make sure to check out that video. I'll leave a link on the screen. If you guys have any questions or comments, leave them down below. I'm going to put some links in the description for some of the tools and things that I use today. If you guys haven't already, make sure to like and subscribe, and hopefully I will see you guys on the next one.